Part 1. Project MTD. Teardown.
Alright, so we'd like to address a couple of things first before we start into this teardown. We are going to gut everything out of it. We're taking the entire front steering assembly out. This horrifying steering column is coming out. All of the rear drive stuff is coming out. The goal on this situation is we're going to fit the rear MTD drivetrain underneath, turned sideways. If I can, I want the original seat to stay intact, but what we're going to do is we're going to center everything, and this will give Donovan the chance to go and have a better center of gravity when he's sitting in the middle. The stance on the machine is going to be slightly wider than the original Power Wheel stance, but we're running rear tires at first that are going to be larger than the originals. So I think that'll counteract the tippiness that everybody's worried about. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to start cutting out for the engine bay. It does look as if this top section is semi-removable. My goal for this is to be able to put the gas tank for the engine somewhere inside of this housing. That way, it's nothing but engine block and an air filter under the front. I think it'll look a lot better. If we can hide the gas tank, that's the goal. Alright, now we're going to tear everything apart. To start with, we're going to pull the seat out. It's got 3 screws across the back. 1, 2, 3. If you find that they're stuck, if you put the screwdriver on and then hit it with a hammer, a lot of times they'll come loose from the plastic. Once you get the 3 screws out, it's pretty simple. Just take and lift it forward and then lift. That'll let you have access to the entire undercarriage. Make sure that as you're working on the project, you take the time to put everything into bags that you might happen to need. It only takes a second, and you just tape it right to the object that you removed it from.
Maybe it is.
Alright, so at this point we're going to get the forward, neutral, reverse removed out of it and pull all the wiring that is on these. These just tug right off. Or at least they should, but they're kind of rusted on. So we're going to get this removed, get all the controllers out, and then we'll take apart the steering up front and go from there. Alright, so Don's on the last screw to the controller cover. Take that out. And it looks as if there used to actually be 2 things sitting in here holding this in, but in the beautiful Maine weather, they seem to have rusted out or fallen out. So that controller just lifts at this point. And there's your actuator wires. So at this point, if you can see up inside, you can see that this is nothing more than just basically a control switch attached here. And I don't really see any screws or anything, so I think we're just going to put a foot right here and just give it a yank. Perfect. So, for those who are wondering, these are the cables that would have been connecting to the battery. They come down into this switch. And then when you toggle it, you go from there, through that, to the controller. And then the controller sends it out to each wheel. So there we are. We got all the controller junk out of it. And at this point now, we're going to get the steering wheel off of there. And then we should be able to flip it over and start removing all the other junk. Alright, so we're going to take a couple of screws out of this and we're going to pull this unit out. But what I'd like to show you right now is for anybody who owns one of these, and the turn radius in these absolutely sucks. If you actually sit in it and pull back on it, there's a little nub here, and this is actually your turn limiter. And if you take this nub and you cut it off, then your turn radius becomes infinite to either side until your tie rod hits. So there's your nifty trick. If you got one of these you're still maintaining, battery powered, or one like mine that has a car battery under the hood. So we're going to get this off, and then we're probably going to flip it over, try and remove all the steering, and try and remove the entire rear end. Oh yeah, but I would think the stupid thing would come loose. Alright, so after that fun learning experience, we figured out that actually it's a cap there, and that apparently there's some sort of centerpiece. So we're going to see if that centerpiece will pop off. This looks like the same thing the tires are mounted with, so...
It is. Wait.
Get your finger out of there. I don't want to have to explain how I stabbed my own son. Alright, so it looks like there's a press-on washer that's in underneath that piece. So we're going to try and give that a tug. Whoever came up with this obviously hated Americans. Okay. Alright, so we got an automotive pry bar now to try, and we got a carpenter's pry bar. So the carpenter's pry bar
can't fit.
Won't fit. Well, maybe a little bit.
But
okay, so we'll try the automotive pry bar. Oh, there we go, that's working. So we got to work it around the shaft and
steer it. I think you're gonna bust it.
There he goes. Alright, so managed to get that stupid little thing off of there. What? Oh, okay. So there goes the steering wheel. So that was our learning experience, was that the steering wheel apparently has the same little joints that the tires apparently have on them. So automotive pry bar worked for that idea. At this point the shaft should just drop down through when we take out the underside. Alright, so there's no real good way to show you this, but basically you need a couple of extensions. There's about 10 inches worth of extensions there. A ½ inch seems to fit, but obviously this thing's made in China, so it's probably some sort of metric. But there's one down in here, and then the other one is down in on this side. Right there. And they obviously were put on with this removed, but we're going to see whether we can just use a straight edge and be careful and get it removed. Alright, so that bolt there is loose.
That's a big bolt.
And that bolt there is loose. If I'm correct, that should be the only thing really holding the front end together. So we'll see whether it'll drop out now. Oh, there we go. So there's your front clip for your power wheel, along with your steering column. All gone. Now we're going to figure out how to get the rear end apart. Alright, so at this point, as near as I can tell, these servos don't seem to actually be mounted to anything, and it seems to slide directly on the shaft. So what I'm assuming at this point is that if I manage to get this end of the tire popped off and I slide this off, I'm assuming that it'll all slide off with it because it's not mounted to anything. So that's what we're going to try. First we're going to take this little clip piece off. There we go. Almost got myself there. And now we're going to see if we can get this lock ring off. Just like the other one, it's locked on there, not very happy. At this point, I honestly think I'm just going to cut it, because we're not using any of this. anybody looking for a nice little angle grinder, these are Pro Series. They're sold on Amazon, and they're usually about 25 bucks. And I like the fact that they're trigger control, so you can feather it. You know, they're not the most heavy duty, but if all you're doing is just cutting blades and stuff, they work great. Okay, so let's see. We'll give this a shove. Oh, that came off easier than I thought it would. Got water in it too. And we'll see if this will give a tug. Oh, so apparently that's the hub that mounts on the inside. We're actually going to keep that. We might try mounting something there. And the motor doesn't seem to want to come straight out. Oh, but that rod seems to go through. I'm betting if I shove the rod all the way through the other side, I bet that motor will come out. There we go. So we pulled the rod out, and the motor just turned sideways. There we go. Gearbox assembly out. Obviously, the other side just comes off the same exact way. Alright, the first major body modification that we're going to be doing is we're going to be cutting this off here flush, and we're going to take this entire box out, because that's where the MTD rear end's going to go. Okay. I'll do the cutting. Alright, so we still need to get this piece out, because this is where the shifter is going to come out from underneath the seat when we're done with everything. There we go. Alright, so there's the rear modification. Now, let's see what we can do with the front in order to make an engine fit. Okay, on this front tab, if you're looking at it, this hole here and the hole on the other side line up right underneath the edge of the front of the windshield. And this line here, these tabs, are actually the front of the windshield itself. So we want to try and skirt around those if possible. So what I'm going to do for this first setup, until I manage to get the engine fully wedged in here and decide how much more to cut out, because I'd really like to leave those two mounting holes since they were rugged and original, is I'm going to cut this off here, and we're going to come across to the hole in the front, and then we're going to cut this front piece down in front of the grill, this front piece down in front of the grill, then we're going to flip everything over, and from the top we're going to cut across and then over the edge of the grill. I'm trying to leave as much of the original top plastic intact as possible on this build. Alright, so the engine is right here, and Donovan and I just tried doing a test fit, and as much as I would love to leave these here for stanchion purposes later on, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. At least one of them has to come out because it's right where the clutch would go, and the other one is right exactly just in the way of everything. The engine block comes out right in underneath here, I'm pretty sure, once I measure it, so we're going to take these and slice them right off. At this point, we're at the point of no return, so if I'm wrong, we've got a useless power wheel. Alright, so at this point, we've literally cut out just about everything we can before we start getting into the windshield and the front windshield mount, which I'm actually expecting to remove anyway because I want the gas tank up in there. So we'll flip it over, see how the engine fits now. Now keep in mind, gas tank is going to come off the engine, and at that point we should have a lot more workspace. So, once the gas tank is removed, and we've got the pull start there, which is coming out that side, we actually might be able to put it through the wheel well, be able to pull start it through there. And the air intake, we're going to see if we can thin that up and then bring it straight up like an old hot rod. And there's the throttle linkage there. And as you can see, it lines up pretty decently with the edge of the engine. So once we get it lifted up in, we should be all set. I'm going to take the entire windshield right off, and then that way I can cut out everything, get it up in here, and then trim the bottom of this windshield so it just barely fits. Now we'll see if we can mock up the rear end and see how well that looks like it's going to fit.
Now we're going to test how well the rear end of the MTD will fit.
At this point now, with everything removed, if you're a decently sized adult or even a teenage kid, you can pretty much throw the body around in weight. Want to grab the rear end? Okay, so we're going to line up the shifter, and then we're going to drop the body down onto it, and it should come right around the wheels. Okay, right there. You stick a tire under the front. There. Okay, so let me grab the camera. We'll do a quick walk around. Hey, don't bump it. Don't bump it. It might fall over. Okay, so what problems are we running into? As you can see, the wheel is hitting there, and it's got about 2.5 inches to the front. And the reason for that is up in here, we seem to already be hitting on this piece in this. Now, I got a couple of options here I can think of right off the bat. The first of which could be that I could cut out more plastic, but I'd really prefer not to because I'd like to be able to mount through this really rugged piece of plastic that's here. So I think what I'll probably do is take this entire mount piece and I'll probably bezel it and see if I can get it to fit that way. Then I'll put a cross member in order to reinforce it. The shifting gear lines up pretty close to the hole that I was hoping to hit in the first place. So I may have to extend it a little, because right now we've got, well, right now we're in neutral, and that's one gear, and we're hitting that plastic piece there. So we can get into one gear, but not quite there. So that's not too big of a deal to take that and cut the rod off there and extend it through and be able to have the shifter there in the cab. Haven't quite decided. And right down there is where we're going to try and line up the MTD steering column coming through. If you circle around, you can see that that lines up with the exact center of the machine. So we're going to go through there and we're going to try and come out right about where that keyhole is. Unfortunately, it has to be slightly off to that side when you measure it out.
Well, now we gotta clean the shop again. And don't forget to take a look at a new Mud More t-shirts.